Hello everyone, I'm Admiral Ellis of the TTO, and welcome back to the Admiral's Musings. Today I just have a little something to bring you. Let me start out with this. You know how I'm sure most of you have moved from place to place, like moved house. I'm sure most of you have at some point in your lives, but you know how you get all your stuff shipped over there and then it always feels like you've never really moved in until you open that last box? Well, I'm just here basically to tell you about the base. The base was... I don't actually have a new base, which is kind of a shame. Well, I have a mobile base. But it was a product of the old base. The old base was a massive subterranean construct underneath my house. Of course, it was built over the course of about a decade. It was built using, nice, really, really nice, super advanced technology that was provided to me by the TTO and the like. The TTO, the SGC, because part of this was funded by the United States government because it was just part of their Stargate. It was an offshoot of the Stargate program because I was rehabilitating a city ship called Devereaux, which was buried underneath Cranston, where I used to live. The goal of the project was to revitalize the city, give it power, and then have it hyperspace out of the cavern which it was buried in under its own power, which was successful after 10 years. Little less than 10 years, I believe. I couldn't tell you when I exactly started because the dates are kind of blurry, and also it's been a long time and I forget. But it was a couple months before I actually officially moved into that house because the TTO helped scout the site and then, of course, changed a little, skewed reality a little bit in order to make it the most attractive option for my parents to go to and purchase, which gave me, my starting point. It was a massive subterranean construct built over the course of a decade with concrete walls on most of it. It was at least 50 stories deep. We honestly, not to say we started to lose track, but when we lost power in those lower sections, it was before we really started to get organized. That was, oh, I don't know, the third year. That was when we went crazy, dug a giant shaft and started to dig out tunnels on the way, way deep levels. And of course, it's very hot down there. And of course, there's a lot of groundwater down there. So they started to flood really quickly. We installed a bunch of pumps. The pumps didn't work as well as we'd hope. The lower levels, underneath level 49, flooded. And we kind of just sealed them off and decided, no, those don't exist. We're just forgetting about those. But we had from level 0, which was the hangar, all the way down to level 49. Well, sub-level 49. And of course, half levels in between where the base was different heights slightly, and all of this opened out onto Devereaux, which actually did go farther down than our base did. The cavern was deeper than our base was. Much, much deeper, as a matter of fact. So bad that the bottom of the city, were it not for the shield slightly melting the rock around it and solidifying it, the city would have been covered in water just like Atlantis was. It would have been pretty awful, and it would have been a mess to clean up, but it was fine. It ended up being fine because the shield around Devereaux held for several million years before it eventually just ran out of power and shut down, but in that several million years the city had been buried, the rock around it had been compressed. Why am I holding this? It had been compressed, heated up slightly by the shield, and then fused into place by the time the shield fell. So it created a watertight seal around Devereaux that we actually had to break when we were coming in with the base. We had all sorts of laboratories. Okay, so the reason I talk about moving is because as of less than a week ago, well no, actually as about a week and a half ago, I shut down the base for good. We finally moved to this new place in Warwick. There's really no use for me to have it now that Devereaux is flying on its own, and it just wasn't prudent to keep the thing around and keep trying to get to it when it wasn't even my house anymore. Of course, the base was not included in the title deed to the house, but nobody needs to know about the base to begin with. Until someone starts to go tunneling through the foundation of that house and finds the passageways, if I don't get that grant to seal them up. Until someone, you know, starts digging through, maybe they want to put a bulkhead in or something, and finds those passageways, nobody's ever going to know that base is there. You guys don't even know what house it was. But by the time you're hearing this, I'm hoping that the federal grant has gone through and the cement trucks are waiting, because tonight is supposed to be the night where I finally block up that base for good. And that will be the end of that. Now, it took a combined effort over many months to get all the stuff out of that base, and there's a lot of stuff that we did leave behind. It's like an old house that you've had for a long time. Although in this case, you're dealing with multi-dimensional, time-traveling people who tend to collect a lot of things. Myself included, the Doctor definitely, and well, the Doctor would keep more stuff if he didn't just have a blue box to carry it around in. That's basically what the TTO is for. It's his collection of people. But I keep getting sidetracked. This base was an enormous construction. It was built down 49 levels beneath the basement. It had originally, well, it had 2 runways, one of which was bricked off by when the second one was built. It had a connection to a football field where the field actually split open downwards using hydraulic pistons so that you could fly stuff up and out of the base if it had a VTOL capability, or just had a lot of force behind it. That brings me around to the Steambird, but I'll talk about that next week, or the week after, depending if I decide to bring back the old the Sci-Fi Universe series, which could be making a comeback. So I remember I never did one about shields. So as I was saying, it was built with, it was actually built with fiber optic conduits originally, but we never found a use for them because technology wasn't really advanced enough. Now it is, but it's, the base no longer in service. It was built with machine shops, electronics workshops, robotic assembly lines. It had a smeltery, just mostly for making the crystals, the glass crystals that Atlantis used for its circuitry. That's that. Atlantis and other Atlantis class or city ship class starships, so Devereaux included is what I meant. Sorry, I was a little bit distracted there. My phone started to ring. Hope it's nothing really important. So as I was saying, again, keep getting sidetracked here. The base was designed, it wasn't self-sufficient, not by any means, but it was only supposed to have one inhabitant permanently anyways. It was myself and Sarah, and that was it. I got Darren and Alec on board, but by the time I got them on board, I transferred over to Devereaux, which is self-sufficient. The city itself is where all of the stuff ended up. All of my 49 levels of stuff, not nearly enough to fill up a city ship. We had conference rooms, we had storage rooms, like, with files and everything. Drafting rooms. It was actually one hell of an assemblage, and I built... The Bat Out of Hell went through its rebuild in my hangar, in the original hangar. I built the Steambird in the original hangar. And by the time I got around to testing it with the Steam Ball, which Sarah built in one of the machine shops, we had already transferred over to the new hangar. And the Bat Out of Hell got its second rebuild in the new hangar as well. So that was that. It was it was quite a construction to get them to approve that runway, almost a kilometer long, because it hangs off the back a little bit. But that base was fantastic. It was really a great place to be just because of the way it was. It was never... I had everything I wanted at my fingertips. It was really quite fantastic. I mean, it probably would have posed problem when I brought Darren, Alec, Dr. Barlow, and Count Volger, and Eddie Malone into the base for the first time. We went into one of the few conference rooms that's there, and it was actually a place where I was planning for the final launch sequence of Devereaux. So there were schematics all over the table, and it was a giant mess. But it got them kind of interested in what I was doing. For a long time, we were planning to make it a base of operations for a TTO base in the US in the 21st century. It kind of ended up being that, but I was the only staff. The SGC ended up kind of taking most of the brunt of the weight on that one. So to be honest, it was never used to its full potential, but to use it to its full potential, I probably would have had to get better pumps and, you know, empty out those bottom levels down to level 75. Or even 100. I don't even... Once you got down that far, it was pretty crazy. It was damn near impossible to put up the concrete and stuff. Fortunately, once you get down that far, you don't have any water pipes or sewage pipes or electrical lines to worry about. It's just dirt and stone. But it's very hard stone down there. It's on bedrock right away, so you essentially start having to drill and blast or vaporize. And we didn't have too much in terms of power generation. We were hollowing out a very large chamber for a nuclear reactor, and then the EPA stopped by and said, you can't do that. Not in the middle of Cranston, even though we showed them that it wasn't a fission reactor, it was a fusion reactor, and it was very safe, and it would make sure that we didn't have to stress the power grid. But they said no nonetheless. I don't know. I'm trying to get it pushed through, but it took too much time and effort, so I gave up on that one. We kind of just had a very large chamber where I started storing compressors for freezing the soil around Devereaux when we needed to move it. Because, yeah, the stone was rock solid, the soil was warranted to collapse if we started to shift the city, which almost happened, but it was frozen pretty solid. I keep getting distracted from what the base really was. It was, frankly, it was the most ridiculous series of boxy concrete tunnels you've ever seen in your life, which was, you know, thousands of feet of tunnel space to walk, all sorts of lines on the floor directing you to this workshop and this laboratory and this, you know, storage room and this conference room and places that were originally designed to be internal greenhouses, but we would have never had the power for that if we didn't set up the reactor. Frankly, it could have been a lot better, but of course I had to leave that house nonetheless. So that was the end of that. We were really planning for failure because we knew I wasn't going to be there forever. But the entire place now is, you know, essentially bricked up. You can open it up if you had, you know, a drilling machine, or if you had a correct radio frequency identification tag, or any other, you know, weird. We had a lot of different ways to open it, but a lot of them got scrapped when I started using the RFID tags, because I could easily distribute them to SGC members, you know, anyone in a higher position that normally like to drop by. You know what's funny? None of the Rhode Island officials ever knew about it. It was always kind of a federal oversight thing, and of course federal oversight meaning the president would ask whoever the commander of Stargate Command was what to do, and they would ask the doctor what to do, and the doctor would say, let him do what he wants, to me, to them about me, for most situations at least. But there was always some things that I never got to do as well as I hoped. There were some things that I did much better than I thought. I mean, the piping that I set up was not supposed to withstand over 1,000 psi, but it did. All the machine shops that could churn out parts just day after day after day after day, and I would create the slightest variation, and they'd make 100 of those, and I'd make another little variation, and they'd make 100 of those, and the only limitation was the power grid, because of course we didn't have our own power grid, and I refused to use the 0-point modules for anything other than powering Devereaux. But I've gone over my 15 minutes, and I'd like to end this today, and if, you know, I don't need a new base, because now I have Devereaux, so you probably won't be hearing about this again. If I have to go back into the base for whatever reason, you probably will be hearing about it, because any sort of ridiculousness could ensue if you leave that place alone for a day with no AI controlling it. It could get pretty much insane, but keep on staring at the stars, and don't look too far beneath your feet. You might just find something. See you later.